What's up, everybody? How's it going today? Guess my beard's a little fluffy out here. I've been riding my bike. I'm sitting here in the daisy patch. It's a little area I found when I was riding my bike around and basically sitting in a wildflower field. All I can see around me are woods and a few telephone poles. Nothing big. I came down here to kind of sit on the corner by myself and ponder for a moment. And generally things come to mind, things that I might want to talk about or ponder, and then it always seems like at the last minute something else pops into my mind. It changes what I was going to talk about. And I guess that's why I do this. And this is why I love making videos. Still to this day on my YouTube channel, I'm unfettered and unhassled by companies and ads trying to advertise on my channel, which is why I tried the Patreon thing. And I appreciate those who donated, by the way. And I started thinking about years ago how if I was ever going to do anything like this long term, I'd still want to be able to cater it to myself. So my point here being that it's great to be able to make a video about any subject I want and change it at the last minute and not have anybody telling me, oh, you've got to be structured and organized. You got to have a better backdrop. Or, man, you don't look nice enough. You're not dressed nice enough. Man, you got to shave your beard. Of course, people can say that, and I can tell them to fuck off. I'm pretty straightforward when it comes to how I feel about things, And I think most people know that about me, if they know me. And those on YouTube may get an image that I'm one way or the other. Those in my personal life may think I'm a little intense and standoffish. I won't take shit. But on the internet, I tend to just blow people off rather than argue with them. So people may think I'm passive. On the other hand, other people may think I'm very aggressive because I can be very harsh to people if they're harsh to me. But that's being human. And that's kind of what came to mind that I wanted to talk about was the nature that we strip ourselves down naked every so often and forget, remember that, you and I suffer the same problems. We have the same journey. Everything in life is a matter of perspective, but all lives have suffering in them. And if you have a lot and you do well, then your suffering may not be monetary. It may be mental, or it may be physical, or it may be all of them. Or you may be physically and mentally handicapped or devastated, yet still have your good thoughts to keep you company, and sometimes that's more than enough. For me personally, I realize that I'm very codependent, and this is something that in my life I've always admired people who are very independent. Something as simple as going on a hike by yourself. I have a friend who likes to go hiking by himself. And I've never been able to do that because it doesn't interest me. And I realized that later in life. That just doesn't interest me. I like partnership. I like companionship. I like people to talk to. Yet, I still do like to go on a quiet bike ride like I did today. So for a few hours, it's okay. For a few days, I get bored. And I think that that's a matter of my perspective. For some people, they could stay for a few days or even a few weeks and not get bored, but a few months they might get, or some people may be able to stay for even several years by themselves and not get bored. And I think that if I was put in that position, I would understand it. Which kind of brings me to my point here, that each one of us is at a different point in our lives. We have a different path we take, a different understanding about what we need to do to survive. And it's very easy for us to point the fingers at each other because people do it so often to tell others, you shouldn't do that or you should do this. And it's not even just the matter of what we tell each other to do or not do. What I was thinking about earlier was the false image we get in our minds of what people are thinking, what they're doing, how their lives are really lived, and then we create these little illusions and these pictures in our minds about how things are. And what came up, I I guess what inspired me to make this was earlier. I was back at the cabin and I was listening to Pandora and Grateful Dead radio, and a song came on from the Grateful Dead. It's called Deal, and then a little while later, one came on called Sugaree. Now, both of these songs were also played by the Jerry Garcia Band, but both of those songs fit in a category to me that's separate from other songs, and they're like these individual songs, and I have kind of a picture in my mind of where they fit. And all at once, this whole structuring came to mind of where I see certain Dead songs, when I heard them, which period of time I heard them within, what shows I was at, or what I was doing, and how each Deadhead has their own perspective of how those songs go. That each other Deadhead has their own little group or song or set of songs that sits outside, that's their favorites. Each one, maybe one they don't like so much, but more than just liking or disliking songs. When they hear a particular song, where does it put them? You know, I was thinking a little while ago about substances and why people like to get high when they go do fun things. For example, if you go out to the park with the friends, why do you have to sit and smoke a bowl? Why do people want to take psychedelics or have a beer? And I thought, because I've always told myself, can't we just enjoy the outdoors without having to be, high or altered in some way? And I realized the reason people do it. It's not about getting high. It's about imprinting the moment on your mind that much more. I've gone to several concerts, but the concerts I've taken psychedelics at have really stood out to me because they've been so intense. I remember very specific moments and songs, and that's what's interesting to me, is that psychedelics don't take away your memory. I mean, high doses can, and of course I would say no more than any other memory compared to, say, alcohol, which you can drink and black out and forget everything. And you can do that on psychedelics too if you take too much, but generally it's for a short period of time. But anyhow, the different perspectives that are lent to something also can be, say, when you're under the influence of psychedelics, you may see a particular flower or learn about something, and forever that will be stuck out in your mind as something associated with that. If I was sitting here right now making this video, talking about this, and I go over here and I grab this daisy, and I want to pick it, but I don't want to kill it, and I look at it and smell it, and I really just start thinking about the daisy for a long time, then in the future, every time I think about the subjects I'm talking about now, I will associate them with daisies. Or every time I see a daisy, I will think about this subject. And that's a very interesting thing, because sometimes our brains can get stuck in these cycles of thinking about certain things we don't want to think about, and I'm sure everybody's had that in the past. I used to think about it's like a mind tick, where I would have this repeating thought about first death, then the fact that my dad died. It was like every time I thought about my dad, how he had died, it brought on all these other thoughts. And I got in this kind of like almost a psychotic, like thinking, not psychotic, but rather just like a psychological repeating pattern, and I don't know what you would call it. And so I started utilizing it. I added new thoughts onto the end of that, saying, oh, well, I also have the power in me to be what I want. I also have the power to live. So whenever I have a bad thought that recurs, which that was the only one I've ever really had, I morph it into something great. But certain subjects or certain situations will bring that forward, and I'll remember that, just like I just did. And I haven't thought about it in like a year. And all of a sudden here I am talking about brain, thoughts, and I think of something, the one thing I just don't like to think about, because in the past it would bother me. It was just like stepping on a crack on the sidewalk and not repeating it with the other foot, if you're one of those people. And so I think it's just fascinating to me how we're all so different. We all share these different psychological like ups and downs, but we all share a reality. Now think about this for a minute. The fact that we think we all share this reality, but we really don't. That we all inhabit completely separate realities. I mean, what is that? For example, when cars are driving on the freeway, when people talk about how people are driving like shit, or, I hate driving, I can't stand it when people drive slow, too fast, too slow, I just want things to flow smoothly at or above the speed limit. And when I step back and really look at the picture, because some people will say, well, people drive like shit. There were several accidents today. And I'd say, how many people live in Portland? You know how many hundreds of thousands of cars are on the road every day around the area? And to think that there's a few fender benders, with those multitudes of people just hoarding down the freeway in these huge lines, bumper to bumper, like inches apart. that shows me that we're all sharing a reality enough to drive these giant automobiles. I mean, I don't know if that comes across right, but when we're in our individual lives talking face to face, it's easy for a person to say or act like whatever they need to get by. But by observing how people actually behave, in other words, the society as a whole, how people drive, how they work, what ethics we share, you can start to get a better picture of what it means to be human. And dare I say that would mean that you're kind of basing what it means to be human on what we observe. And is that wrong? I would say it's not wrong, because animals teach their young. They learn to follow the guidelines and the rules. And the problem is with humans, we want to break free from that. We want to be able to be individuals, and we want to be able to shine and be different. And some people scoff at that. They don't want anything different. They just want to be like everybody else. And others want to be too different, to the point where they think that they're better than other people. And those who think that they're better than other people, it's easy to just label them as narcissistic, arrogant. But I've been one of those people, and I'm willing to admit it. Of course, today I don't think I'm better than anyone else. But there was a time in my 20s, let's say, where I thought that most people were just dumb and ignorant. And today, I'm not going to say that I think that they've gained any more intelligence in general, but I realized it was unfair for me to label society as a whole from my perspective. And today I hear a lot of younger, not kids, but young men mostly, who talk about the system and the damages that the system causes. The hardships that we face are because of either government agencies, secret societies, bankers, and all of this to a degree is true, but it becomes irrelevant because the thing is, it's not a matter of whether or not we realize that we're being lied to. It's a matter of whether or not we treat the other men and women that are our neighbors with the same respect, instead of calling them sheeple or asleep or ignorant, or they're just following the system. Because you start to realize that there are people who have gone full mode conspiracy. They've totally abandoned what they used to think, and they've gone and they've raged against the government, they've marched in protest, they've done all kinds of stuff, and then they settled down to a family because they wanted to raise kids. And then, so they seem like an average Joe in the corner, and then somebody drives by and sees them and thinks, look, there's just some douchebag who probably doesn't even know anything that's going on in the world. He's just happy with his white picket fence and his kids. And I hope that came across right. It's easy to label the guy in his shorts getting his mail as being just another family man that doesn't know what's going on, but he may have been a person who leads the movement. We're judging people based on what we think they know, is what I'm trying to convey, and what we think they don't know. So discussing issues like conspiracies and the damage we're doing to our planet and our people, it leaves no doubt that there are some bad apples out there that cause a lot of havoc. You can create a lot of problems in this world, but it doesn't mean that people are stupid and unaware, because people have to live their lives too. We could spend our whole lives fighting against invisible monsters or even visible ones, but we still have to live. And remember that we all do live in different realities. One guy might be out there fighting for a cause that we have no idea is even a cause. And it may be the most important cause that one could possibly be fighting for. And we wouldn't even know it. There can be people fighting against from the internal, from the inside, that are working quietly and carefully. What you might call the superheroes, the ones who work undercover, under mask, I would say people like I can't remember the name, Anonymous. I should remember the word Anonymous. Even people like the whole Anonymous movement, I think it's a great intention behind it, but there's some arrogance that comes with it. And that comes when they think that they really know what's going on. Let's see, one particular guy, and I'm just generalizing here and just saying a lot of people who mean well end up causing more harm by the way they go about it. Let me give you an example or a metaphor in a smaller way. You have a good friend who has a drug addiction, and you really want to help them because you love them and you don't want to see them die. So you walk up and you go, "Hey, Bob, you're a fucking idiot for doing drugs. You're so stupid." Now, there are people who would go about it this way, but I think most of us know that telling someone they're dumb and that they shouldn't do something isn't going to help. Give you another example is like when you go to the checker, when I used to buy cigarettes. And I remember there was this one person who worked at 7-Eleven I ran across a couple times, and my wife also mentioned him. That's how I knew he'd said that. He's like, "Yeah," he told me, "Oh, don't you know that smoking, these things will kill you," that kind of stuff. She's like, "Yeah, I've smoked for 20 years, I'm aware of the dangers." But from his mind, people are just dumbly smoking and unaware. It's either that or he's so arrogant that he doesn't smoke that he wants to tell others things that are obvious. But either way, going about it that way does no good. Telling someone they're an idiot or they shouldn't be doing something, or telling them something obvious about a situation, only serves to further make them want to rebel. Somebody said that the other day. My wife said that. She was talking about quitting smoking. And she said, "Why does it seem like when you quit smoking, it makes you even want to smoke more? It's like you want to rebel against yourself." And I totally get that. It's like when a person quits using drugs, they may have just had their last fix. I shouldn't say using drugs. That's I know better. Let's say a person who was a junkie and was shooting heroin on a regular basis, and they just got their last fix, and they're already wanting another one because they decided that was their last fix, even though it hasn't kicked in yet. They could have the needle still in their arm. The same thing happens with cigarettes. That's how similar it is. You smoke your last cigarette and you right away want another one because you've decided to quit. And that psychological aspect of who we are, I use those things. It opens up. It's a universal truth, a universal story throughout all people. And there are a few who make the claim that they have the full control over their faculties and their choices, and that they always make great choices. They always eat the right foods. They're full-blown vegan. They've never touched drugs. That's great. But the reality is most people aren't that way. Most of us are just, most of us have been down a few roads. I didn't grow up in a sheltered world or an ignorant world. I grew up in a world where people, with a lot of different types of people, where I ended up smoking pot. I ended up taking psychedelics a lot. I got to say, the one thing I didn't do was drink. I drank a little bit when I was younger, like every kid does, but I never drank regularly for any more than maybe a month or so with my friends when I lived in this house. But there was a reason for that, because I wanted to tell myself, you can be in control of yourself for one substance, and it's going to be alcohol, because alcohol is a very enjoyable substance if you drink it regularly. It can take you out of your pain. It can give you comfort when you're not feeling well. It can lubricate you socially so you can totally function with a group of people when you may be a little shy. And you can dance. It gives you energy at the right doses. It wouldn't give you energy, but it makes you... we know what alcohol does. I don't have to tell you. But my point being that even though people say it's a horrible drug, it is in excess. But when used properly, it's very enjoyable. And this is the very reason I don't do it. Because I can beat myself up for saying, well, you shouldn't smoke so much pot. And I did. So I cut down on my pot intake, and I don't smoke nearly as much as I used to. Even though it never really held me back any more than when I didn't smoke pot. See, a person who has a low motivation one day isn't going to change because they don't smoke pot. It may a little bit, but people are people. And the drugs just magnify the way a person is and can worsen some of the negative traits. But I smoke marijuana, and then I take kratom daily. And I also drink coffee and I vape. So those are my vices. But alcohol, being the most readily available, very enjoyable, and legal drug, is the one that I really will only do on rare occasions. Take a few shots. So I'm not saying this to say, oh, I don't drink. I'm making the exact opposite point. That just because I don't drink doesn't mean that I go out and say, oh, well, I just smoke pot, I don't drink, I'm not going to pollute my body with that stuff. Because, I've had plenty of alcoholics call me the dumb stoner smoking pot, even though we know alcoholics are losing their brain cells, and cannabis, at least THC, is neuroregenerative. It actually incites your brain to create more brain cells. Yes, marijuana can make you smarter. Alcohol will make you dumber. And this is just a general statement there. Of course, it's not that it's going to make you smarter. But my point is that it's not always so easy to point the finger at the effect something has on someone and say that must be damaging or they must be hurting themselves. And I think it's important for us all to step back and give each other a little bit of space when it comes to who we are and what we do. And like vaping, you know. I feel kind of stupid vaping. I find it super cheesy when I see those guys like blowing huge clouds. But I stop myself short of calling them douchebags or idiots, you know, but I've wanted to sometimes. And I don't mean any offense if you're an elite vapor, you know, I'm saying that I stop myself short of saying, oh God, you know, here's another guy in a black t-shirt and a black hat blowing big clouds and bragging about his whole setup. And I guess I really sat and asked myself, why does it bother me that they want to do that? And I realized there's two reasons. One is because as an ex-smoker for 20 years, I know how hard it is to quit, and picking up vaping can be very useful for somebody who used to smoke. But at the same time, I know that taking small puffs, like a cigarette, is one thing, but taking huge ones and going and having contests to blow them, there's got to be some negative consequences to that, or at the very least, here's the one that really bugs me, is that the kids today are seeing this, just like the kids of the 60s and 70s saw smoking, okay? And they saw smoking in a positive light, that it made you cool, okay? Now, here's what the vape industry is doing. They're making vaping look cool, like they made smoking look cool. The intention is to get smokers to vape, but the reality is that some kids will pick up smoking and vaping just because it's something new, or vaping. Most people who vape do it because they used to smoke. But as times change and it becomes more popular and cloud blowing becomes a thing, then more kids might. So, trying not to get off track here, my point is that I stopped myself and realized, dude, I'm making I'm making a judgment call because I see people doing something. They enjoy it. They want to build their units. They want to blow big clouds. Who am I to say they shouldn't? So, you know, I'm hoping that kind of attitude we can carry to everything. To realize just because we do something one way doesn't mean everyone else should. It never does. It never does. Because if we had a homogenized society with everyone liked the same food and everyone wanted the same thing, it'd be pretty damn boring. So those are my thoughts. I guess I better get going. I'll show you where I'm at here. Just down at the bottom of this little gully here. This follows this wires. And this is the flower patch I was in. It's pretty cool, huh? Love places like this. It's kind of a dead end. So I'm going to head back out. And thanks for joining me, and I'll talk to you.